think you can handle this weld? The foreman, Frank, barked, a smirk spreading across his weathered face. Go fetch some coffee, sweetheart. This is a man's job. He gestured to the massive I-beam swaying slightly in the wind, 50 stories above the Chicago streets. But the young black welder didn't move. She simply looked at the beam, then back at him, her eyes calm behind her safety glasses. When Frank and his cronies started laughing, she didn't say a word. She just reached for her helmet. The air was thin and cold up here. Below the city was a distant, muffled roar. This was the skeletal framework of the new Titan Tower, a monument of glass and steel, and today everything was on hold. The lead welder had called out sick, and the structural tie-in for Section C was critical. The entire project timeline depended on this one, single weld. Every minute of delay cost the company thousands of dollars. Maya Washington, at 28, was the only other certified structural welder on site. She had been relegated to minor tasks, but now, with no other options, all eyes were on her. The problem wasn't just the weld itself, a complex vertical joint that required absolute precision. The problem was Frank. He had been riding her since her first day, making it clear he didn't think a woman, let alone a black woman, belonged on his crew. "How you mess this up and the whole section could be compromised," he said, his voice loud enough for the other workers to hear. "The lives of everyone in this building will be on your hands. You sure you can handle that pressure?" He was trying to intimidate her, to make her back down so he could justify calling in an expensive contractor and prove his point. If you believe that skill has no gender or color, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, because you are going to want to see how this unfolds. Also, let us know in the comments what city you're watching from, and type the word respect if you know she's about to prove them all wrong. Maya ignored his bait. She ran a gloved hand over the seam of the beam, checking the fit-up. It was a standard procedure, but she did it with a focus that silenced some of the nearby chatter. Frank didn't know about the 16 years she'd spent learning the craft. He didn't know she was the daughter of Marcus Spitfire Washington, a legend in the welding world who could fuse metal like it was butter. He hadn't taught her just to be good. He had taught her to be perfect under pressure. This exact type of weld was the one he had made her practice 1,000 times in his small workshop back in Gary, Indiana. She clipped her grounding clamp to the steel, the metal-on-metal clang echoing in the tense silence. She took a deep breath, lowered her helmet, and gripped the stinger. The world narrowed to a tiny, dark window, with only the silver line of the joint in view. Frank crossed his arms, a confident, mocking smile on his face, ready to watch her fail. As she struck the arc, a blinding flash of blue-white light erupted, followed by a fierce, steady hiss. Could she silence the doubt and pull off a weld that even seasoned veterans would approach with caution? The fierce hiss of the welding rod was the only sound. For 5 solid minutes, Maya was a machine. Her movements were economical and precise, a steady hand moving across the steel seam. There was no hesitation. The other workers, who had been laughing with Frank just moments before, slowly fell silent. They watched, transfixed. They were witnessing something beyond simple competence. This was mastery. Young Carlos watched with wide eyes. He had been welding for 2 years and had never seen anything so smooth. It was like watching an artist paint. The bead she laid down was perfect, a stack of dimes, as the old-timers would say. It was the kind of weld you saw in textbooks, not on a windswept skyscraper 50 floors up. Frank stood with his arms crossed, his face hardening with every second that passed. He had expected her to fail. He wanted her to fail. His authority on this site was built on an old-world foundation of grit, muscle, and the unspoken rule that some jobs were not for women. Maya was dismantling that foundation with every inch of her weld. He wasn't just a foreman, he was the gatekeeper of a tradition, and he saw her as an invader. His prejudice was a shield, protecting him from the reality that the industry was changing and that talent could come from anywhere, in any form. Inside her helmet, Maya was in her element. She didn't hear the wind or the distant city. She heard her father's voice from years ago in his cramped Indiana workshop. "Don't watch the light, Maya. Watch the puddle. See how it flows. The sound will tell you everything you need to know." The steady, frying bacon sizzle was the sound of a perfect weld. It was the sound of home. Then it was over. She broke the arc, and a sudden silence fell over the platform. She lifted her helmet, her face damp with sweat, and calmly reached for a chipping hammer to knock away the slag. The metal beneath was revealed, a clean, shimmering and utterly perfect seam of fused steel. It was flawless. No pits, no undercut, no porosity. The silence from the crew was no longer mockery. It was awe. She had done the impossible, and she had done it in less than 5 minutes. Maya stood back from the beam, her expression neutral. She knew the weld was good. Frank, however, refused to accept what was right in front of him. He walked over, squinting at the joint, trying to find an imperfection that wasn't there. His face was red, with a mixture of anger and humiliation. "It looks clean," Carlos muttered, unable to help himself. Frank shot him a death glare. "Looks can be deceiving," he snapped. "We can't take any chances. We need an X-ray on this, immediately." A few workers exchanged uneasy glances. An on-the-spot X-ray was not standard procedure. It was an extreme measure, typically reserved for suspected structural failures, not for brand-new welds. It was a clear power play, a desperate attempt by Frank to find a flaw and discredit her. It would also cause a significant delay, a delay he would undoubtedly pin on her. "See?" he said, raising his voice for all to hear. "This is the problem. Now the whole damn project is on hold while we have to run extra checks." Maya met his gaze, her own voice steady and clear. "Check it. It'll pass." Her confidence was like gasoline on a fire. Frank's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about a weld anymore. It was a direct challenge to his authority. He pulled out his radio. "This is Frank, Section C. I need a technician up here for a priority radiographic inspection. Now." The minutes that followed were thick with tension. The crew stood around, idle and awkward. The project that was already behind schedule was now falling further behind. Maya ignored the stares. She cleaned her tools, methodically placing each one back in her kit. Her calm professionalism was its own form of defiance. Frank paced back and forth, a caged animal, while the wind whipped around the steel skeleton of the building. He was creating the very delay he was complaining about, all to satisfy his own ego. The other workers were caught in the middle, some siding with Frank out of loyalty or fear, others looking at Maya with a newfound grudging respect. The crew was fracturing, right here on the 50th floor, and everyone knew this confrontation was about to come to a head. Just as the tension felt like it couldn't get any thicker, Frank's radio crackled again. This time, it wasn't the technician. "Frank, this is Henderson. What's your status? I'm seeing zero activity on the Section C camera feed." The voice was calm, but held an unmistakable edge of authority. "Mr. Henderson was the overall project manager, the big boss for the entire Titan Tower construction." Frank's face went pale. A surprise check-in from Henderson was the last thing he needed. "Just running a safety check, Mr. Henderson," Frank stammered into the radio. "Had to halt work for a moment to ensure structural integrity. We'll be moving again shortly." "I'm on my way up," was the curt reply. The radio went silent. A new kind of pressure was now on Frank. He was caught between his need to prove Maya wrong and the fear of his own boss seeing his crew standing idle. During the wait, Carlos quietly walked over to Maya, keeping his voice low. "That was the cleanest bead I've ever seen," he said. "Don't let him get to you." Maya gave a small, appreciative nod. It was a minor gesture, but it was the first crack of support she'd gotten all day. An alliance, however small, had been formed. Finally, the technician arrived, a lanky man named Jim who seemed completely unaware of the drama he was walking into. He carried his portable X-ray equipment and got straight to work, setting up the film on one side of the beam and the emitter on the other. Frank hovered over him. "Check it carefully, Jim," Frank said, trying to sound like a concerned foreman instead of a desperate man. "This weld was done by a rookie. We can't afford any mistakes." Jim just nodded, focusing on his task. He was a neutral party, a man of science in a den of ego. He placed a radiation warning sign up, and the workers took a few steps back. The ticking clock grew louder in Frank's head. Mr. Henderson was on his way, and the fate of this weld, Maya's reputation, and Frank's own job were all about to be decided by the image on a small piece of radiographic film. Jim finished the exposure with a quiet beep from his machine. He processed the film right there on the platform using a portable developer. The entire crew watched in silence as he clipped the dark, wet film to a viewer. He switched on the backlight. He stared at the image for a long moment. He looked at the weld, then back at the film. He pursed his lips. Frank leaned in, a hopeful, predatory glint in his eyes. "Well, see anything?" Jim turned, not to Frank, but to Maya. He held up the film for all to see. The image of the weld was a solid, uniform, light grey line. There were no dark spots indicating porosity, no lines showing cracks or lack of fusion. It was perfect. "It's flawless," Jim announced, his voice flat and professional. He then looked at Frank. "Actually, it's better than flawless. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've never seen a root pass this clean on a field weld. This is the kind of quality we see in a fabrication shop, under perfect conditions." Before Frank could even process this defeat, a new voice cut through the air. "What in the hell is going on here, Frank?" Mr. Henderson had arrived. He was a man in his 50s wearing a pristine white hard hat and a look of intense displeasure. His sharp eyes took in the scene, the idle crew, the X-ray machine, and Frank's stunned, furious face. Frank scrambled to recover. "Mr. Henderson, sir, we were just doing a routine safety inspection. Had a new welder on the job, wanted to be extra careful." Henderson's eyes scanned the crew and stopped on Maya. His expression of anger softened into one of surprise, then recognition. He completely ignored Frank and walked directly toward her. "Washington," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I'll be damned. Marcus told me you might be joining the Titan project. I didn't realize you were on Frank's crew." He turned to the bewildered workers and the utterly mortified Foreman. His voice was now loud and clear, an official announcement. "Everyone, listen up. This is Maya Washington. For those who don't know, her father is Marcus Washington. He helped design the engineering protocols for every single structural weld in this skyscraper. If there is one person on this planet who knows how this tie-in is supposed to be done, it's her." The world on the 50th floor tilted on its axis. Frank stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. Maya was no longer just a rookie welder. She was royalty. The impact of Henderson's announcement was instantaneous. The air, thick with tension just seconds before, was now filled with a stunned silence. The workers who had been snickering with Frank now couldn't meet Maya's eyes. Carlos had a grin so wide it looked like it hurt. Frank's face had gone from red to a pasty, sick-looking white. He had been publicly exposed, not as a diligent foreman but as a prejudiced fool. He had challenged the one person on site with a direct lineage to the project's core design. Mr. Henderson didn't waste a moment. He turned his cold, analytical gaze back to Frank. "My office now," he said, leaving no room for argument. He then looked at Maya, and his tone shifted from ice to business. "Washington, you're the new lead on this section. Your crew is behind schedule. Get them back to work." It was a battlefield promotion, direct, efficient, and brutal. Frank, without another word, turned and walked toward the service elevator, a man defeated. Maya simply nodded to Henderson. "Yes, sir." There was no gloating, no "I told you so." She turned to face the men who were now officially her crew. For a moment, they just stared at her. Then, she took charge. "All right," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Let's get moving. Sal, Dave, I want you to prep the next beam. Carlos, check the torque on those bolts from the last section. Let's move." Her professionalism was her victory lap. She didn't need to celebrate. The work itself was her vindication. And to the crew's credit, they responded instantly. Years of job site instinct took over. They were given an order by a competent leader, and they followed it. Sal, a burly man who had laughed the loudest with Frank, was the first to move. "You got it, lead," he grunted, and went to work. The title lead was his surrender and his acceptance. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had been completely rewritten. And as the crew jumped back into action, the rhythm of construction returned. Only this time it was more efficient, more focused, and led by the quiet woman they had tried to drive away. The rest of the day presented a new kind of challenge for Maya. Her trial by fire was over. Now came the trial by leadership. She had to command the respect of men who, hours earlier, had openly scorned her. She didn't do it by raising her voice or asserting her new authority. She did it with competence. She led from the front, anticipating needs, solving problems before they became delays. She pointed out a minor adjustment to the rigging of the next beam, a subtle change that shaved 20 minutes off the process. It was something only someone with an intimate understanding of the physics and workflow would see. It was a move her father would have made. Her growth was visible in her posture. She stood taller. Her instructions were concise and confident, no longer the quiet newcomer but a leader in her element. "Carlos, I need a 60-10 rod for this next tack. Dave, watch your slag line." Her commands were respected because they were correct. She wasn't on a power trip. She was simply running the job the way it was supposed to be run. Late in the afternoon, Sal, the worker who had been Frank's main crony, approached her during a brief water break. He twisted a water bottle in his large calloused hands, avoiding eye contact. "Look, lead," he started, the word still sounding new to him. "That stunt Frank pulled, it was wrong. Your work it's damn good." Maya just looked at him and nodded. "We've got a building to finish, Sal. Let's focus on that." The simple act of accepting his awkward apology without rubbing it in did more to earn his loyalty than any speech could have. It was a sign of a true leader, someone focused on the mission, not the drama. By the end of the shift, the crew wasn't just on schedule, they were slightly ahead. The toxic tension had been replaced by the hum of productive work. Maya packed her tools, the quiet satisfaction of a hard day's work feeling sweeter than any revenge. She hadn't just survived, she had taken control, remade the environment through sheer undeniable excellence, and proven that the best person for the job was, in fact, her. The workday ended, but the story wasn't over. As Maya was packing up her gear, the exhaustion of the day finally setting in, she saw Mr. Henderson approaching. His face was grim. "Walk with me, Washington," he said. They walked to a quiet corner of the floor, away from the rest of the crew. The wind whistled through the steel beams, a lonely sound. "First things first," Henderson began, his voice low. "Frank has been reassigned, effective immediately. He won't be setting foot on this site again. His brand of leadership is obsolete." Maya nodded, but she could tell this wasn't the main reason he'd sought her out. This wasn't a simple pat on the back. "The real reason I'm here," Henderson continued, "is that Frank's incompetence was covering up a much bigger problem. The reason this project is so far behind schedule isn't just today's drama. We've discovered critical flaws in the welds on 3 of the main structural nodes, joints that were signed off on by Frank over the last 2 weeks. The blood drained from Maya's face. This wasn't about a single beam anymore. This was about the core integrity of a 90-story skyscraper. An internal review found microscopic fractures. Under stress over time, they could lead to catastrophic failure, Henderson said, his voice tight. "We can't tear down the sections. The cost would be astronomical, and the project would be dead. We need to reinforce them, but the procedure is difficult." He unrolled a blueprint, showing her the 3 critical nodes. The reinforcement required a specific, highly complex welding technique designed to fuse new steel plates to the existing joints without compromising the surrounding structure. It had to be done in place under incredible pressure. "I've read the project specs 100 times, Henderson said. "Your father designed this reinforcement procedure himself as a last resort contingency. He called it the Washington Weave. It's a masterpiece of engineering, but on paper, no one has ever successfully performed it in the field." He paused, looking her directly in the eye. "I don't have anyone on staff certified to do it. The plans say it takes a master's touch. Frank sure as hell couldn't do it." He let the implication hang in the air. The entire fate of the billion-dollar Titan Tower didn't rest on a crew. It rested on her. "I know this is a hell of a thing to ask," Henderson said, "but can you do it?" Maya looked at the blueprint, at the intricate patterns her father had designed. It was a test far beyond anything she had faced. This was his legacy and the ultimate challenge. "We're going to need more light," she said, "and I get to pick my own support crew." Night fell on Chicago. The city became a sea of lights below, but 50 floors up, Titan Tower was a dark skeleton, populated only by a small, hand-picked team. It was Maya, Henderson, and a nervous but determined Carlos and Sal, who had both volunteered without hesitation. Powerful floodlights were rigged, casting harsh shadows across the steel and turning the work area into a lonely, windswept stage. The mission was to perform surgical reinforcement on the 3 compromised nodes before sunrise. Each weld was a Washington weave, a technique so complex it looked like stitching on steel. It required controlling the heat, angle, and speed with a level of precision that was almost inhuman. Maya started on the first node. The hiss of the arc was sharp in the night air, the brilliant light a stark contrast to the darkness. She moved with a fluid grace, her entire being focused on the molten puddle of steel. This wasn't just a job. It was a conversation with the metal, a dialogue her father had taught her. Sal and Carlos worked as her support, feeding her new rods, adjusting the gas flow, and shielding the weld from the wind with portable barriers. They worked in a silent, efficient rhythm, a team forged in the day's conflict. One node was complete, then the second. Each one was a slow, painstaking masterpiece. Hours bled together. Exhaustion was a physical weight, but adrenaline and focus kept Maya going. They were on the final node now, the most critical of the three. This was the linchpin for the entire upper section of the tower. As she was laying the final, crucial pass, the wind, which had been a steady howl, suddenly became a violent roar. A rogue gust, funneled by the surrounding structures, slammed into the platform with the force of a battering ram. A spare argon gas tank, not yet secured, was knocked from its mooring. It rolled directly toward Maya's station. "Tank!" Sal yelled in panic. In that split second, Maya's transformation was complete. The quiet, hesitant rookie was gone, replaced by a commander. Without breaking her arc, she shifted her body weight, angling herself to partially shield the weld. "Carlos, the tank! Now!" she yelled, her voice a clear command over the wind. Carlos dove, grabbing the tank just before it could crash into the scaffolding and ruin the weld. While he wrestled it into submission, Maya, in a move of pure instinct and brilliance, adjusted her angle and heat on the fly, compensating for the momentary disruption and the change in atmospheric conditions. It was a move that wasn't in any textbook. It wasn't something her father had taught her. It was her own. She finished the weld. The hissing stopped. In the sudden silence, broken only by the whistling wind, she lifted her helmet. She had done it. The nodes were secure. The skyscraper was safe. As the first hint of dawn broke over Lake Michigan, casting a soft gray light on the city, the small crew stood in exhausted silence. Mr. Henderson ran a portable ultrasound scanner over the three reinforced nodes. The screen showed solid, deep, perfect bonds. He switched the machine off and looked at Maya, his face etched with fatigue and profound relief. "Perfect," he said, his voice filled with awe. "Absolutely perfect. You didn't just save the project, Maya. You saved this entire company." Her arc was complete. She had walked onto this site as an outsider, a target for scorn. She was leaving it as its savior. Her revenge was not petty. It was monumental. It was etched into the very core of the building. The next day, Henderson made it official. In a site-wide meeting, he announced Maya Washington's promotion to Site Quality Supervisor. She was taking Frank's old job, but with expanded authority over every weld and every structural component in the tower. She was the new gatekeeper. Her first act as supervisor was to promote Carlos to lead welder of his own crew. She shook Sal's hand and told him she was counting on his experience. She wasn't just a boss, she was a leader who built a team. In the months that followed, the culture of the Titan Tower project transformed. The site became known for its professionalism, efficiency, and unwavering standards. Maya's leadership, based on respect and undeniable skill, became the new benchmark. She walked the floors of the nearly completed skyscraper, the Chicago skyline sprawling before her. It was a view of glass and steel, of clouds and sky. But for her, it was more. It was a monument to her resilience, a testament to her father's legacy, and a permanent reminder that the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. She had earned her place in the sky. 6 months later, Titan Tower was a shimmering new jewel in the Chicago skyline. Inside, tenants were already moving in. On the 50th floor, Maya Washington, now in a clean supervisor's hard hat, was leading a final walkthrough with a new batch of apprentice welders. Among them was a young woman, her eyes wide with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "The machine can tell you a lot," Maya said to the group, her voice echoing slightly in the finished space. "But the sound tells you the truth. You have to learn to listen." She looked at the young woman and smiled, and always watched the puddle, not the light. The circle was complete. Carlos, now a seasoned lead, ran the day-to-day operations with a quiet confidence she had instilled in him. Sal was her most trusted senior inspector, his loyalty absolute. One day Henderson mentioned in passing that he'd heard Frank was supervising a small strip mall construction in the suburbs. It was a footnote, a quiet confirmation that the world had moved on. Frank had been relegated to the periphery, while Maya's work touched the clouds. She often went to the observation deck after hours, looking down at the city she now helped hold up. The tower wasn't just a building. It was her story, written in steel, A permanent and powerful legacy of a woman who was told she didn't belong and ended up owning the sky. Maya's story is a powerful reminder that true skill demands respect and that the best, most lasting revenge is simply massive, undeniable success. Her journey shows that one person's determination can change an entire culture. If you watched until the end and believe in the power of resilience, show your support by commenting, "I watched until the end" down below. Your engagement is what allows us to find and share more incredible stories like this one. What part of Maya's victory was the most satisfying for you? The perfect weld? The promotion? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't go anywhere. There's another story of justice and triumph waiting for you. Click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now, and we'll see you there.